I showed up to check my land one morning, and the bridge I built, paid for, maintained, and legally owned was gone. Not damaged, not collapsed, gone. Replaced with a neat little dirt gap and an HOA sign that said, "Removed for community safety." That bridge just happened to be the only crossing between their entire neighborhood and the main road. So I did the only reasonable thing left. I closed the road they'd been using without permission for years. I own a piece of land most people would call inconvenient until they realize how valuable inconvenience becomes when it sits in exactly the right place. About 10 years ago, I bought a narrow stretch of rural property that ran along a creek just outside a development called Silver Ridge Estates. It wasn't flashy land, no lakefront, no mountain views, but it had one important feature. It controlled the only practical crossing point between that neighborhood and the main highway. Years before Silver Ridge existed, the original landowner had built a small but solid wooden bridge over the creek to access the back acreage. When I bought the parcel, that bridge came with it, documented, surveyed, and clearly within my boundary lines. At the time, the subdivision hadn't fully expanded yet, and there were multiple access options. But over the years, as more houses went up and developers cut corners like they always do, something interesting happened. The alternate access roads became less practical. One was seasonal. One was too narrow for regular traffic, and slowly, quietly, Silver Ridge residents started using my bridge as their primary way in and out. At first, I didn't care. It wasn't worth the energy to fight it, and honestly, it helped a few people who were just trying to get to work or school without driving 10 extra miles. But here's the problem with letting people use something for free. Eventually, they stop seeing it as yours. They start seeing it as theirs. And once that switch flips, things always get ugly. The HOA came into the picture a few years later. Standard setup, board members with too much time, committees for things nobody asked for, and a deep belief that community planning gives them authority over anything within sight. The first time they contacted me was about 5 years after I bought the land. A woman named Carol, who introduced herself as HOA Infrastructure Coordinator, sent me a very polite email asking if I would consider formalizing the bridge as a community access point. I said no. Clearly, no ambiguity. That should have ended it. It didn't. Over the next couple of years, they tried again in different ways, suggesting shared maintenance agreements, offering to upgrade the bridge, hinting that it would benefit everyone if I just signed something. Every time, I declined. Not because I'm unreasonable, but because I've seen how these things go. The second you give an HOA formal access, you lose control. And I wasn't interested in watching my property slowly turn into a committee-managed liability. So we existed in this uneasy balance. They used the bridge. I allowed it. No paperwork. No agreements. Just tolerance. And tolerance, as it turns out, is something HOAs mistake for weakness. The breaking point came one Tuesday morning when I got a call from a neighbor who leased part of my back acreage for storage. He sounded confused. Said something about trucks and equipment near the creek. I drove out there expecting maybe some unauthorized dumping or a minor issue. What I found instead was unbelievable. The bridge was gone, completely removed. In its place was a rough dirt slope leading down to the creek, clearly unusable for normal vehicles. And sitting right at the edge was a freshly installed sign with the HOA logo that read, "Bridge removed, due to safety concerns. Alternative access recommended." I just stood there for a minute, trying to process what level of confidence it takes for a group of people to remove infrastructure they don't own and then leave behind a sign explaining their decision like it's a public service announcement. Then I started noticing the details. Fresh tire tracks, equipment marks, a pile of lumber off to the side, my lumber from my bridge. They hadn't just removed it, they had dismantled it on my property, without permission, without notice, without even the basic courtesy of pretending to ask. I didn't call the HOA, I didn't argue, I didn't send angry emails, because once something crosses from annoying into illegal, the conversation changes. This wasn't a disagreement anymore. This was property damage, unauthorized entry, and destruction of a privately owned structure. So I documented everything. Photos, video, measurements. I checked my cameras, and sure enough, there it was. 2 days earlier, a contracted crew working under HOA instruction, dismantling the bridge like they were doing routine maintenance. Carol was there too, standing on the bank with a clipboard, directing things like she was managing a landscaping project. That was all I needed. I called my attorney, then I called the county, then I made a decision that would solve the problem permanently. See, the bridge wasn't the only thing on my land that Silver Ridge depended on. The road leading to it, the gravel access road that connected their neighborhood to the highway, also crossed my parcel for about 300 yards before reaching the main road. For years, they had been using it like it was theirs. It wasn't. And unlike the bridge, I had never even verbally allowed that. I just hadn't enforced it. That changed that afternoon. By the next morning, I had contractors on site installing a heavy-duty steel gate right at the point where their access road entered my property. Not a flimsy chain, not a suggestion, a real gate. Posts sunk deep, lock system, clear signage, private road, no access. Trespassers will be prosecuted. By noon, Silver Ridge was in full meltdown mode. Cars backed up at the gate, residents getting out, confused, angry, calling each other, calling the HOA, calling anyone who might fix their suddenly very real problem. Because now, the same neighborhood that had casually used my land for years without thinking twice, suddenly had no practical way in or out. The alternative routes? Still there, still inconvenient. Suddenly very important. Carol showed up within the hour, red-faced, furious, demanding I remove the gate immediately. I let her talk. Then I asked one question. Why did you remove my bridge? She launched into a speech about safety inspections, liability concerns, structural integrity, and protecting the community. I let her finish. Then I said, "That bridge was on my land." She said, "It affects our residents." I said, "So does this gate." That's when it clicked for her. Not emotionally, logically. For the first time, she realized that this wasn't a situation she could manage with HOA language and committee authority. This was property law, and they had just crossed a line they couldn't talk their way out of. The next few days were chaos. Emergency HOA meetings, residents complaining, people trying to negotiate directly with me. Some angry, some surprisingly reasonable. But the facts didn't change. They had destroyed my property without permission, and until that was addressed, nothing on my side was reopening. Their attorney reached out. Mine responded. The conversation shifted quickly from demands to damage control. Because once evidence started moving, camera footage, contractor records, emails, the situation became very clear. The HOA had authorized and executed the removal of a privately owned structure on land they did not own. There's no creative interpretation that fixes that. In the end, they folded. They had to. The agreement they signed covered full reconstruction of the bridge to my specifications, reimbursement for damages, legal fees, and a formal acknowledgement that both the bridge and the access road were private property with no HOA rights attached. And the best part? I kept the gate. I did agree to reopen it, but only under a paid, documented access agreement with strict terms. Maintenance contributions, liability coverage, usage limits, everything they had tried to force informally, now locked into a contract that protected me completely. Funny how fast community access turns into negotiated privilege when reality shows up. The bridge was rebuilt. Better than before, stronger, properly inspected, exactly how it should have been if they had just asked instead of assuming. And Silver Ridge? They still use the road, still cross the bridge, but now every single person who drives over it knows something they didn't before. It's not theirs. It never was. And the only reason they still have access is because I allow it. That's the thing about people who confuse access with ownership. Sooner or later, someone reminds them where the line actually is. So tell me, if an HOA destroyed your property without warning, would you have shut down their only road too? Drop your opinion in the comments and subscribe for more HOA revenge entitled Neighbor Drama and Satisfying Real-Life Stories.